I'm Erin Mallory Long, and today we're going to talk about Season 2, Episode 10 of Dawson's Creek called High Risk Behavior. Ooh. We open with Pacey and Dawson hanging out, but they're reading lines, and we're supposed to be confused for a second and think that they're revealing feelings for each other. But it's actually these, horrible lines of dialogue from Dawson's movie that we're going to keep hearing for several episodes until this movie is shot. But at the very least, we get to hear Rachel Lee Cook say them later, so it's all worth it. You know, Pacey's like, yeah, it's obtuse and blah, 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 but it's you and Joey. And Dawson's like, no, it's not. And then the theme of this episode is it's riskier for them to not do it. Because that is then what every story is about. Every story is about pairs of people and if they're having sex or not. If they're going to have sex, what's going on? And so the overarching thing is Dawson with his movies saying, it's riskier if they don't have sex. Jen, we find out, is the producer of his new movie, so she's giving out flyers for auditions. And then Jen and Dawson kind of talk about who should be the lead, and, Dawson has one guy, and Jen's like, he's not sexy, and then, they're talking about, who should be him, and I'm kind of like, right, but, the character's based on Dawson, so, how sexy does he need to be? And Jen and Dawson still have the same haircut, which I have never noticed before, but it is so distracting to me because they look the same and they're in every single scene together now and they just have the same head. It looks way better on Jen. Pacey and Andie meet up and we find out that Andie had requested that Pacey get an HIV test and Pacey did and he gave her test results and I was just like, oh wow, this seems groundbreaking to me to have teens not only talking about getting condoms and stuff, which they do, or showing condoms and stuff, but talking about getting an STD test is crazy, especially for 1998. And I was just like, oh wow, great job. Dawson comes over and finds Joey drawing. She explains that she's been drawing in class and they have a nude model and he's like, aren't you weird about that? And she was like, no, but yes. And then that's pretty much what happens. And then he ends up telling Joey that oh yeah, my movie's about coming of age in a small town. Obviously she knows it's about them. It's just okay. But that keeps happening. Dawson basically has that conversation with 5 people in this episode where he's like, it's not about us. And everyone's like, yeah, it is. We all know it. It's fine. Then we see Abby and Chris discussing auditioning. Chris is jazzed about auditioning because he's like, oh, actors get laid. And it's going to be on the festival circuit. And I was like, all right, calm down. So he wants Abby to audition with him because, again, they're immediately best friends. And, he forgot that either of them were ever friends with Jen, it seems. And then Jack finds Joey also doing the drawing and is like, oh, this is great. The lines and the shadows and art stuff. And then he spills chocolate milk all over it. It's literally, he has an open glass of chocolate milk, which why do you have that at school? Why isn't it in a container? Spills it all over it. And so her project is ruined. Then we get an audition montage, which is just everyone from the school auditioning for Dawson's movie. It's they have full reign of the auditorium, I guess, to hold these auditions. Fine. The dialogue is still super embarrassing. Fine. So Jack comes up with a solution for Joey, which is that he will nude model for her to fix her assignment. Because basically now she doesn't have an assignment to turn in to her class and she's going to fail and blah, blah. And finally she agrees. So I'm like, okay. We see Andie at the pharmacy picking up prescription. Pacey comes up and snatches it out of her hand even though she's like, no. And I'm like, who does that to someone at the pharmacy? And then he starts making fun of the Xanax that she got that's hers. And then she tells him oh, Andrea is also my mother's name. And he's like, oh man, sorry. You should have known not to do that, Pacey. But then they end up being in the condom aisle and they're like, oh, was Pacey getting condoms? Because they kind of talked about should we have sex? Maybe we'll have sex sometime. They can't really decide, whatever. So they decide to buy condoms. Abby auditions with Chris, it turns out, but is mad about it. And then Chris is like, I don't get why they're not hooking up, blah, blah, blah. Jen is just sitting there as if she doesn't know Chris. It's so weird. Then Chris is gross during Abby's audition and then it's over. That was the whole scene. And then Andie describes to Pacey what, like, her ideal perfect time is. And it's, like, a French restaurant, like, walk by the blah, 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 and, like, go to a B&B and, like, have, like, cool music playing and stuff, like, romantic music and, like, whatever. So we obviously know that's going to come back up. Then Jen tells Dawson, this is obviously about Joey. It reads like an autobiography. And he's like, no. But then she's, like, mad because she doesn't feature more heavily in it. And it's like, fine. And then we all of a sudden cut to Joey and Jack. Jack's in a towel. He's, like, getting ready to disrobe. So, like, now we're just split between Jack and Joey and Andie and Pacey and Jen and Dawson for the rest of the episode. So what's happening with Andie? Nope. What's happening with Nope. So what's happening with Jack and Joey is they're discussing, like, the art project and him getting naked. He mentions that it's like Titanic, and she's like, yeah, but, like, I'm Jack and you're Rose. And I was like, love. And then Joey finally is like, okay, you have to actually go. Like, I actually can't do this. And then the easel falls over, and then he jumps up to help her and disrobes accidentally. So then she's like, I guess she's like, well, I already saw it. So, and then they, like, she starts drawing him. Dawson is, like, wandering around outside Jen's house, like, dancing around outside it. She comes out, and then you see in the distance a rowboat. And I was like, I thought Joey and Dawson were the only people who rowed boats on this body of water. Like, it's crazy. It's like a rowboat with, like, lanterns and stuff on it. And I was like, oh my God, there are other people who are rowing boats on this creek. Like, insane. So they're just kind of, like, hanging out. We go back to Andie and Pacey. We see, like, one shot of them, like, on a date at a restaurant. We're like, okay. We go back. Joey finds out that Jack isn't a virgin. She's like, oh, he had sex once. And then she's like, describe it to me like art. He is naked. He's a naked teen boy. And she's like, describe, like, your only time you've had sex to me. And I was like, oh, no. I remember what happened, but I was still like, no. Jen and Dawson are still bonding. Dawson's like, maybe you should have been the leading lady. Like, but not in so many words. I'm just like, I can't. And then Dawson's whole argument is just that it's, like, it's too conventional to, like, have characters have sex who are into each other. And basically, like, Jen's like, yeah, but normal people who like each other would have had sex. So then Jack and Joey and the sex description is, like, going very sexually. Like, it's just, like, very intense. She's just, like, listening intensely. A phone rings, and then, like, we figure out that Jack has a boner. But it's like, what else was going to happen? Then we see Andie's blindfolded. She's being led into a room. You're like, what is going on? Pacey has led her into a B&B. They, like, discuss, like, whether or not, and then Andie's like, he's like, you don't have to do it. Pacey is, like, so sweet. Pacey's like, we don't have to do this. I just wanted to give you the perfect night, like, blah, 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 like, whatever you're comfortable with. And Andie's like, no, I want to do it. And they start, like, kissing. So then Dawson is back in his room. There's this weird scene where Dawson's sitting on his bed. He reaches over and pulls out a framed picture of Joey and puts it on his nightstand and then, like, deletes part of his script. And that's the whole scene. Joey and Jack then are, like, kind of awkward, but he's redressed, and then they start making out, like, kind of passionately. And you're like, okay. And then you see a pan over of the drawing of him, and, like, his penis isn't even showing. Like, his thigh is, like, all the way over. I feel like that's not what your art class wanted, but whatever. And then all of a sudden, Dawson is climbing through Jen's bedroom window, and she's like, what are you doing? And I was like, what are you doing? And then he basically starts kissing her and is just like, yeah, like, this is a good idea. And then Pacey and Andie are making out at the B&B, and Pacey's like, actually, like, I don't want to do this. And then he explains why, and it's like, I want us both to be ready. I don't think that we're quite ready yet. Like, I don't want to mess this up. Like, I want it to be, like, right. Blah, blah. It's, like, very mature, very unpacey, and that's what he was trying to be. It's, like, very, 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 very sweet. Which leads directly into the next episode, which is called Sex She Wrote, and that's what we'll talk about next time. Bye!